The Princess's Refusal. On the planet Zarian, under a sky painted with two suns, stood the Grand Crystal Palace. It shimmered like a jewel in the endless galaxy, attracting visitors from distant stars. This palace was home to Princess Zyra, the most beautiful and intelligent royal of her time. She was admired and desired by countless suitors from every corner of the universe. Yet despite their riches, charm, and power, Zyra refused every single one of them. Inside the palace, a royal meeting was underway. Alien ambassadors, ministers, and royal council members gathered in the grand hall. The air was tense as another suitor exited, defeated. He was a mighty warlord from the Targan system, his body covered in battle scars. Yet even he couldn't impress the princess. "Why does she refuse everyone?" whispered one council member. "She risks the peace of the galaxy with her stubbornness," muttered another. The head counselor, an elderly Zarionian with deep blue skin and glowing eyes, stepped forward to address the princess. Zyra sat on her crystal throne, her silver hair cascading like a waterfall down her shoulders. Her face was calm but distant, as though her mind wandered far away from the room. "Your Highness," the counselor began, bowing deeply, "the suitors you have turned away are not mere visitors. They are leaders of powerful worlds, alliances that could strengthen our planet. Yet you refuse them all. May we ask why?" Zyra looked at him, her violet eyes sharp and piercing. "Must I explain myself every time I make a choice?" she replied coolly. The counselor hesitated. "It is not only about you, Your Highness. Zarian depends on your decision. The galaxy watches us, waiting. If you continue to refuse, we risk offending powerful factions. War may follow." Zyra stood, her presence commanding the room. "Do you think I fear war?" Her voice was soft, but carried strength. "I would rather face 1,000 wars than bind myself to someone I do not trust. My heart is not a prize to be won by the highest bidder or the strongest warrior." The council fell silent. They dared not question her further, but the tension in the room grew heavier. After the meeting, Zyra retreated to her private chambers. The grand windows overlooked Zarian's glowing forests and rivers that sparkled like molten gold under the twin suns. She often found solace in this view, but today her heart felt heavy. She walked to a small, hidden alcove in her chambers. There stood an ancient artifact, a crystal orb pulsing faintly with light. It was said to be a relic of her ancestors, holding secrets of Zarian's future. Only the royal family could touch it. Zyra placed her hand on the orb, and whispers filled her mind. Visions of a prophecy she had been told as a child. "The one to melt the ice of your heart will come from beyond the stars, carrying neither crown nor blade." She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. The prophecy had haunted her for years. Every suitor she met seemed wrong, as if none of them were meant to fulfill it. And yet she couldn't ignore the fear that one day her refusal to choose might bring ruin to Zarian. While she stood lost in thought, a commotion erupted outside the palace gates. Zyra turned, her instincts sharp. Through the balcony, she saw royal guards surrounding someone, an outsider. A tall figure stood among them, dressed in strange, rugged clothing. He had no glowing armor, no crown or jewels. His face was human, with sharp features and eyes that reflected curiosity and defiance. He didn't bow like others. Instead, he stood straight, meeting the guards' glares without fear. "Who dares disturb the royal grounds?" Zyra's voice echoed as she stepped onto the balcony, her presence immediately silencing the chaos. The human looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm Captain Ethan from Earth," he said, his voice steady. "I didn't mean to intrude, but your guards brought me here. I was just exploring your planet." "Exploring?" Zyra raised an eyebrow. "No one explores Zarian without permission. Humans rarely venture this far into the galaxy. Why are you here?" Ethan hesitated but then smirked. "I was curious. Heard a lot about the famous princess who refuses every suitor in the galaxy. Thought I'd see what the fuss was about." The guards gasped at his boldness. No one spoke to the princess like that. Zyra's lips twitched into the faintest smile, though her eyes remained cautious. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Captain," she said. "Especially here." "Danger doesn't scare me," Ethan replied, holding her gaze. For the first time in years, Zyra felt a flicker of something unexpected. A challenge, a spark of interest. This human was unlike anyone she had met before. He didn't grovel, didn't boast, didn't try to impress her with power or wealth. "Take him to the council chambers," Zyra ordered. "Let's see what this human really wants." As the guards escorted Ethan away, Zyra couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival was no accident. For better or worse, her life, and perhaps Zarian's destiny, was about to change. The human intruder. The Crystal Palace buzzed with quiet unease after Captain Ethan's arrival. Whispers spread through the grand corridors and shimmering halls. A human. Here, on Zarian, it was unheard of. While the Royal Council debated what to do with the unexpected visitor, Ethan sat in the council chamber, seemingly unbothered by the alien stares directed his way. The room was an architectural marvel, with crystalline walls that refracted light into a symphony of colors, but Ethan paid no mind. His eyes were fixed on the entrance, waiting. Then she entered. Princess Zyra moved with a grace that commanded attention. Her silver hair shimmered under the glowing lights, and her violet eyes were as sharp as blades. The room fell silent as everyone turned to watch her take her place at the head of the council table. Ethan stood out of respect, but his face betrayed no sign of awe. "So," Zyra began, her voice calm yet piercing, "the human speaks. Let us hear what he has to say." Ethan gave a small, almost defiant smile. "I didn't come here to speak. I came here to see." "See what?" Zyra asked, her tone cold and unreadable. "The galaxy's most talked about princess," Ethan replied. "The one who refuses every suitor, no matter how powerful, how wealthy, or how dangerous." Gasps filled the room at his bluntness. Zyra's lips pressed into a thin line. "You speak boldly for someone who has trespassed on Zarian soil," she said. "Do you have any idea how close you are to being thrown into the void?" Ethan shrugged. "Probably as close as I am to annoying you." For the briefest moment, a flicker of amusement crossed Zyra's face, but it vanished just as quickly. "Why are you really here, Captain?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. "I told you. Curiosity," Ethan replied, his gaze unwavering. "You have suitors from every corner of the galaxy, but you turn them all away. Why?" "That is none of your concern," Zyra said sharply. "Maybe not," Ethan admitted. "But from where I'm standing, it seems like you're not looking for someone powerful. You're looking for something real. Or maybe," he paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air, "you're just scared." The room froze. Even the guards shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the explosion of anger they were certain would follow. But Zyra didn't lash out. Instead, her eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped into a dangerously calm tone. "Scared of what, Captain?" Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "Scared of trusting someone. Scared of letting someone in. Because once you do, you lose control." The silence in the room was deafening. Zyra's fingers curled slightly on the arm of her throne, but her face remained unreadable. "You assume much for someone who knows so little," she said finally. "Maybe," Ethan replied, "but I'm not wrong." Zyra studied him for a long moment, her violet eyes searching his face for something. Then she leaned back in her seat, her expression unreadable. "Council," she said, her voice carrying a commanding tone. "Leave us." The council members exchanged surprised glances but didn't dare argue. One by one, they filed out of the room, followed by the guards, until only Zyra and Ethan remained. The door closed with a soft hiss, and the silence grew heavier. "You're either very brave or very foolish," Tyra said, her voice quieter now. Do you realize how many men have tried to understand me and failed? I'm not like them, Ethan said simply. No, Kyra agreed, standing and walking slowly around the table. You're not. They came with gifts, armies, promises of alliances. You came with nothing but questions and arrogance. Yet I'm still here, Ethan pointed out, watching her closely. For now, Kyra said, stopping a few feet away from him. But don't mistake my patience for acceptance. You're only here because I'm curious about you. Don't give me a reason to regret it. Ethan smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. Kyra tilted her head, studying him again. You humans, always so unpredictable. Perhaps that's why the galaxy underestimates you. And you? Ethan asked. Do you underestimate us? Kyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned toward the window, looking out at the glowing Zerian landscape. For a moment, her expression softened, as if she were seeing something, or someone, that wasn't there. Your kind is rare in this part of the galaxy, she said finally. Few humans venture this far, even fewer leave. Guess I'll have to be the exception, Ethan said lightly. Zara glanced back at him, her lips curving into a faint, almost reluctant smile. We'll see. For the first time in years, Kyra felt something stir within her, a spark of curiosity she hadn't felt in a long time. Who was this human, really? And why did his words linger in her mind long after they were spoken? As Ethan was escorted to temporary quarters within the palace, Kyra stood alone in the chamber, her thoughts racing. This human was different, no doubt. But was he different enough to change the course of her destiny? One thing was certain. Captain Ethan's arrival had disrupted the delicate balance of her world. And deep down, Kyra couldn't help but wonder if that was exactly what she needed. The princess's secret. The halls of the Crystal Palace were silent, save for the faint hum of the palace's energy conduits. The twin moons of Zerion cast their pale glow through the massive windows, painting the marble floors in silver and shadow. Captain Ethan couldn't sleep. His quarters were luxurious, a mix of alien elegance and comfort, but his restless mind wouldn't let him rest. Something about Princess Kyra fascinated him, though he couldn't decide if it was her sharp wit, her cold demeanor, or the way her eyes held a hint of something deeper, something guarded. He had seen leaders and warriors from dozens of planets, but none like her. Ethan stepped out of his chambers, curiosity guiding his steps. The palace was a labyrinth of shimmering corridors and intricate carvings, each telling stories of Zerion's past. He wasn't entirely sure where he was going, but something tugged at him to keep moving. As he turned a corner, he froze. At the end of the dimly lit hallway stood Kyra, her back to him. She wasn't wearing the regal robes she had worn during the day. Instead, she was cloaked in a simple midnight blue dress, her silver hair loose and flowing. Ethan's instinct told him to turn back, but something about her posture stopped him. She wasn't the composed, untouchable princess he had seen earlier. Her shoulders were tense, and her hands rested on the frame of a hidden door etched into the wall, one he hadn't noticed until now. "What are you doing here?" Kyra's voice cut through the silence, sharp and unexpected. Ethan stepped forward cautiously. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Palace is a bit too shiny." Kyra turned her head slightly, just enough for him to see the edge of her face. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something, perhaps irritation, perhaps curiosity. "You shouldn't wander here," she said. "This part of the palace is forbidden." "That makes it sound even more interesting," Ethan replied, his tone light, but his steps careful. Kyra sighed and turned fully to face him. "Humans, always walking into places you don't belong." Ethan gave a small shrug. "We call it curiosity. Some say it's a flaw. Others say it's how we survive." For a moment, Kyra said nothing. She simply studied him, as though weighing whether he was worth her time. Then, to Ethan's surprise, she stepped aside, revealing the door behind her. "If you want to know what you've stumbled into," she said quietly, then stepped through. But don't say I didn't warn you. Ethan hesitated. Something in her tone made him second-guess himself, but his curiosity won out. He stepped forward, brushing past her, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The chamber beyond was nothing like the rest of the palace. It was smaller, darker, and colder. At its center stood a crystalline pedestal, and resting atop it was a glowing orb, faintly pulsing with light. The air in the room seemed heavier, as if the artifact itself demanded reverence. Ethan glanced at Syra, who stood in the doorway, her expression guarded. "What is this?" he asked. "The heart of Zarian." Ira replied, her voice quieter now. "A relic passed down through my family for generations. It's said to contain the essence of our planet's past, present, and future." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the orb. "Why do you keep it hidden?" Zyra hesitated, then entered the room, her steps slow and deliberate. "Because it shows more than what most are ready to see. The heart doesn't just reveal the future, it reveals truths about the one who touches it. It knows your desires, your fears, your secrets, and sometimes it shows things you wish you hadn't seen." Ethan turned to face her, his curiosity now mixed with caution. "You've touched it, haven't you?" Zyra's gaze fell to the floor. For a moment, she was silent, and Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. But then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I was just a child when I first placed my hand on it. And what I saw," she trailed off, her jaw tightening, "it shaped everything I've done since." Ethan frowned, stepping closer to her. "What did you see?" Zyra's violet eyes met his, and for the first time, Ethan saw vulnerability in them. "I saw destruction, fire, and death. My people, gone. And standing in the ruins, I saw myself, alone." The weight of her words settled heavily in the room. Ethan didn't know what to say. He had faced danger before, but this was something entirely different, a burden he couldn't begin to understand. "That's why you push everyone away," he said after a moment. "You think getting close to someone will lead to what you saw." Zyra's expression hardened. "It's not a matter of thinking, Captain. It's a matter of knowing. The heart doesn't lie." Ethan glanced back at the glowing orb, its light steady and unyielding. "Maybe not," he said, "but prophecies don't always mean what we think they do. Maybe it's not about avoiding the future. Maybe it's about changing it." Zyra looked at him, a flicker of something, hope, perhaps, crossing her face. But just as quickly as it appeared, she pushed it away. "Leave," she said, her tone firm once more. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan wanted to argue but knew better. He nodded and stepped back toward the door, sparing one last glance at the heart of Zarian. As he left, he couldn't shake the feeling that Syra's secret was only the beginning. And as for Syra, she watched him go, her thoughts a whirlwind. For years, she had been certain of her path, but now, for the first time, doubt had crept in. Captain Ethan wasn't just a visitor. He was a disruption, a challenge to everything she thought she knew. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her or intrigued her. The rising threat. The stars above Zarian burned brighter than ever, a beautiful deception that masked the growing danger. The galaxy's attention had turned toward the Crystal Palace, and not just because of the human intruder, Captain Ethan. Word of Princess Zyra's refusal to marry had reached ears that didn't take rejection lightly. Deep in the void of space, aboard a shadowed warship cloaked in electromagnetic shrouds, a pair of golden predatory eyes glared at a hologram of Htera. The figure watching was Prince Vorner of the Xorith Dominion, a rejected suitor whose pride had been wounded in front of the galactic elite. "She humiliated me," Vorner growled, his talon-like fingers gripping the edge of the console. "The Zarian throne will pay for her arrogance." Behind him, his war council waited in silence, the tension in the air as sharp as the blades strapped to their backs. Finally, one of them spoke. "The Zarian forces are formidable, my prince. Attacking them directly would be unwise." Vornar turned, his golden eyes narrowing. Then we don't attack them directly. We make them come to us. Prepare the fleet. It's time we remind Zarian why the Xorith Dominion should never be crossed. Meanwhile, back on Zarian, Ethan found himself sparring with one of the royal guards in the training grounds. His movements were quick and unpredictable, a mix of human improvisation and grit that the guards found baffling. "Your style is unusual," one of the guards said, catching his breath after Ethan had disarmed him with a feint. "It's called winging it," Ethan replied with a smirk, tossing the weapon back to him. Princess Zyra watched from a distance, her arms crossed as she leaned against a crystalline pillar. She hadn't meant to stop, but something about the human's determination, even in something as simple as sparring, caught her attention. "You fight like you're always making it up as you go," she said, stepping closer. Ethan turned, surprised to see her there. "That's kind of my thing. Planning too much ruins the fun." "Fun?" Zyra raised an eyebrow. "Combat isn't supposed to be fun." "That's where we humans differ," Ethan said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've learned to adapt because we're always the underdogs. Makes life interesting." Zyra tilted her head, studying him. "You say that as if it's a strength. Isn't it?" Ethan asked. "Being unpredictable means no one knows what to expect from you. Sometimes that's enough to win." Before Zyra could respond, an alarm blared through the palace. Red lights flashed across the walls, and the guards immediately snapped into action. Zyra's expression darkened as she turned toward the source of the commotion. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, already following her. "An intrusion," Zyra said, her voice sharp and focused. "Something, or someone, has breached our planetary defenses." They rushed to the palace's command center, where holograms of Zarian's orbit displayed several large ships entering the system. Xorith warships. Zyra's council members were already present, their voices a cacophony of panic and strategy. "They'd brought an armada," one of them said, pointing to the holographic display. "This is a declaration of war." "No," Zyra corrected, her eyes narrowing. "This is a message. Vornar wants me to respond." Ethan studied the hologram, his brow furrowing. "Looks like they're holding their position just outside your defense grid. They're not attacking. Yet. Because he's waiting for me to come to him," Zyra said. "He knows I won't ignore this threat." "And will you?" Ethan asked, his tone cautious. Zyra hesitated, the weight of her duty pressing down on her. "If I don't respond, he'll take it as a sign of weakness. Zarian's reputation cannot afford that." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're playing into his hands. He wants you angry. He wants you to rush into this without thinking." Zyra shot him a sharp look. "What would you have me do? Sit here and wait for him to destroy us?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "But you can fight smarter. You said it yourself. He's sending a message, so send one back. Show him you're not afraid, but don't give him what he wants." Zyra's gaze lingered on him, her mind racing. She hated to admit it, but there was logic in his words. "Fine," she said finally. "We'll send a team to intercept one of his ships, capture it, and gather intelligence. If we're going to fight, I need to know exactly what he's planning." "I'll go," Ethan volunteered. The room fell silent. Zyra's council members looked at him as if he'd just proposed jumping into a black hole. "You?" Zyra said, her tone skeptical. "I'm not just some clueless human," Ethan replied. "I've dealt with hostile ships before. Besides, you need someone who's unpredictable, remember." Zyra studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Fine, but you'll go with one of my elite teams, and if you get yourself killed, don't expect me to mourn." Ethan grinned. "Deal." As the room erupted into action, Zyra turned to the hologram of Vornar's fleet. This was no longer just about Zarian's safety or her refusal to marry. This was personal, and if Vornar thought she was an easy target, He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The heart of the princess. The stars outside the Crystal Palace were unusually dim, as though the galaxy itself held its breath. Inside the throne room, the tension was palpable. Princess Zyra stood before her council, her back straight, her expression cold and unyielding. Across from her, Captain Ethan leaned casually against a pillar, his arms crossed. His relaxed demeanor was a stark contrast to the royal advisors, who were arguing among themselves. "He cannot stay here any longer," one counselor exclaimed, pointing at Ethan. "This human has no place on Zarian. His presence alone is a threat to our traditions and safety." "I've heard worse insults," Ethan said with a shrug, earning a sharp glare from the counselor. Zyra raised a hand, silencing the room. Her voice was calm but carried a weight that made everyone listen. Enough. The room fell silent, but the air was thick with unspoken tension. Zyra turned to Ethan, her violet eyes unreadable. "You've proven yourself useful, Captain, but this isn't your fight. Why do you insist on staying?" Ethan straightened, meeting her gaze. "Because you're fighting battles on two fronts, one against Fornar, and another inside yourself. And I think you need someone who's not afraid to tell you the truth." A ripple of shock passed through the council. No one spoke to the princess like that. No one dared. Zyra's jaw tightened, but instead of anger, there was something else in her expression, a flicker of vulnerability. "You think you understand me?" she asked, her tone quiet but cutting. "I think you hide behind your duty," Ethan said, stepping closer. "You push people away because you're scared of what might happen if you let them in. That's not strength, it's fear." The room went silent again, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Zyra's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold still. "Leave us," Zyra said suddenly, her voice firm but calm. The council hesitated, glancing at one another nervously. "I said, leave," Zyra repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. One by one, the counselors filed out, their disapproving glances lingering on Ethan as they left. When the massive doors closed behind them, Zyra turned her full attention to the human who had somehow managed to pierce her carefully constructed walls. "You think you've figured me out?" she asked, her voice low. "I think you're more than what you let people see," Ethan replied. "And I think you're tired of carrying this weight alone." Zyra's gaze faltered for the briefest moment. Then, without a word, she turned and began walking. "Follow me," she said. Ethan hesitated, then fell into step behind her. She led him through a series of winding corridors, deeper into the palace than he had ever been. The air grew cooler, the walls darker, until they reached a massive door carved with intricate symbols. Zyra placed her hand on the door, and it opened with a low rumble. Beyond it was a small circular chamber. At its center stood the heart of Zarian, glowing softly on its pedestal. Ethan stopped, his breath catching as he took in the sight. "What is this place?" Zyra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the glowing orb. "This is the heart of Zarian. It's been in my family for generations. It's said to hold the essence of our planet, our people, and our future." Ethan approached cautiously, the light from the orb casting strange shadows on his face. "What does it do?" Zyra hesitated. "It shows you the truth. About yourself. About the future." She turned to him, her expression guarded. "I touched it once, when I was young. What I saw shaped everything I've done since. Every decision, every refusal. It all started here." "What did you see?" Ethan asked softly. Zyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Destruction. Fire. Death. My people gone. My home reduced to ruins. And at the center of it all, I stood alone, surrounded by the consequences of my choices." Ethan frowned, his gaze shifting to the glowing orb. "You think that vision is set in stone. The heart doesn't lie," Zyra said. "Maybe not," Ethan said, stepping closer to her. "But maybe it's not meant to show you what will happen. Maybe it's showing you what could happen. What will happen if you let fear control you? Zaira stared at him, her walls cracking just enough for a flicker of doubt to slip through. You think I should just ignore it? She asked, her voice laced with both frustration and longing. No, Ethan said. I think you should face it. You're a leader, Zaira. But being a leader doesn't mean shutting yourself off from the people around you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is trust someone else. Zaira looked back at the heart, her expression conflicted. For years, she had carried the weight of that vision, letting it guide her every move. But now, for the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. You don't have to do this alone. For a long moment, Zaira said nothing. Then, with a deep breath, she reached out and placed her hand on the heart. The room filled with light, and Zaira's vision blurred. Whispers filled her mind, fragments of possible futures flashing before her. But this time, amidst the chaos and destruction, she saw something different, a figure standing beside her, a human. When the light faded, Zaira's hand dropped, and she turned to Ethan. Her expression was no longer cold or guarded. It was something else entirely. You were right, she said quietly. I've been running from this for too long. Ethan smiled. Well, it's about time you stopped. For the first time in years, Zaira felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She wouldn't be walking it alone. The final battle. The stars above Zarian dimmed as the Xorth Dominion's warships moved closer, their hulking shadows swallowing the light. The entire planet held its breath, knowing the moment of reckoning had arrived. In the Crystal Palace, the air was thick with tension as Princess Zaira stood in the command chamber, surrounded by her advisors, military generals, and Captain Ethan. The holographic display in the center of the room flickered with images of the Xorth fleet, their weapons systems primed and ready. At their center loomed the flagship, Dreadspire, a massive vessel bristling with weaponry and menace. They've positioned themselves just outside the planetary defense grid, General Chorus said, his voice strained. If we engage, we'll be playing directly into their hands. They want us to act out of fear, Zaira replied, her tone cold and calculated. But I won't give them that satisfaction. Ethan, leaning against the edge of the console, glanced at Zaira. You're calm for someone with an armada breathing down her neck. She didn't look at him. Panic is a weapon. I don't intend to hand it to Vornar. Ethan smirked. Good, because I've got a plan that's just crazy enough to work. The room turned to him, the advisors exchanging skeptical glances. A human plan. One of them muttered under his breath. Do you want to survive this or not? Ethan shot back. Listen, Vornar's entire strategy is based on overwhelming force, right? He expects you to either attack head-on or sit back and hope your defenses hold. But what he won't expect is us going after him directly. You're suggesting a direct assault on the Dreadspire? General Chorus asked, incredulous. Not an assault, Ethan clarified. A surgical strike. We infiltrate his flagship, take out their command systems, and force him to retreat before he even gets the chance to fire a shot. The room erupted in protest, advisors shouting over each other about the risks, the impracticality, the sheer recklessness of such a plan. But Zaira's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Enough, she said, silencing the room. She turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. You think this will work? It's risky, Ethan admitted, but it's better than sitting here waiting to be annihilated. Vornar won't stop with Zarian. If we don't make a move now, he'll see it as an invitation to take whatever he wants. Zaira stared at him for a long moment, then turned to General Chorus. Prepare a strike team. Captain Ethan will lead it. The room erupted again, but Zaira raised her hand, her voice firm. He's unpredictable. That gives us an advantage. And if this plan fails, I'll bear the responsibility. Ethan's smirk returned. You won't regret this. Hours later, The infiltration team stood in the palace hangar, preparing for their mission. Zaira approached Ethan as he adjusted his gear, her expression guarded. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "No," Ethan admitted. "But when has that ever stopped me?" Zaira allowed herself a small smile, then handed him a small device, a sleek crystal disc glowing faintly. "This is a locator beacon. If things go wrong, activate it. I'll bring you back." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think you'd care if I got into trouble." "I don't," Zaira replied, her tone neutral. "But you're useful. For now." Ethan chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." As the strike team boarded their stealth shuttle, Zaira stood back, watching. For the first time, she felt a pang of uncertainty, not about Ethan's plan, but about the possibility of losing him. The infiltration was a chaos of shadows and split-second decisions. The Xorith flagship was a labyrinth of metallic corridors and flickering lights, patrolled by alien soldiers who moved with deadly precision. But Ethan's team was quicker, quieter, more determined. "Stay sharp," Ethan whispered to the team as they approached the command center. His pulse raced, but his instincts kept him focused. Inside the command center, Vorner stood at the helm, his golden eyes scanning the holograms of Zarian's defenses. He didn't notice the intruders until it was too late. Ethan burst into the room, weapon drawn, his team spreading out to secure the perimeter. "Hope we're not interrupting," he said, his tone laced with mockery. Vorner turned, his expression twisting into a snarl. "You dare board my ship?" "Yeah, we humans are bold like that," Ethan replied, his smirk widening. The room erupted into chaos. Vorner's guards charged, but Ethan's team held their ground. Ethan himself lunged toward the control console, dodging laser fire as he planted an explosive device. "This is your last chance, Vorner," Ethan shouted over the noise. "Pull your fleet back, or I blow your systems to hell." Vorner laughed, a deep, menacing sound. "Do you think one human can intimidate me?" Ethan grinned. "Maybe not, but one human can sure as hell ruin your day." Before Vorner could react, the explosive detonated, not enough to destroy the ship, but enough to disable its primary systems. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and the ship began to shudder. "Fall back," Ethan ordered his team, retreating through the smoke-filled corridors. Back on Zarian, the palace watched as the Xorith fleet began to retreat, their flagship limping away. Cheers erupted throughout the command chamber, but Sarah didn't celebrate. She stood by the communications console, waiting for word from the strike team. Finally, the transmission came through. "Mission accomplished," Ethan's voice crackled through the speakers. "Did you miss me?" Sarah allowed herself a small sigh of relief, though she didn't reply. As the room celebrated, she stepped away, her thoughts racing. Ethan had succeeded, but the battle wasn't over. The galaxy had seen Zarian's strength, but they had also seen its vulnerability. And Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, because amidst the chaos, one thing had become clear: Ethan wasn't just an intruder. He was a catalyst, a spark that had set something in motion, and Sarah wasn't sure if she should thank him or fear him. The new beginning. The twin suns of Zarian rose slowly over the battered crystal palace, their light casting a warm golden glow over the city below. The once pristine towers bore the scars of battle, but they stood tall, a symbol of resilience. The Xorith fleet had retreated, and for the first time in weeks, the skies above Zarian were clear. Yet within the palace walls, Princess Zaira stood at a crossroads. In the grand hall, the royal council gathered in hushed voices, awaiting Zaira's arrival. It wasn't the usual bustling chamber filled with arguments and debates. This time, there was an air of expectation, of finality. Today wasn't just a celebration of victory. Today, Zaira would make a choice that would change Zarian's future forever. Ethan, leaning against a marble column at the far end of the hall, couldn't help but feel out of place. He had been through countless battles and impossible missions, but this, standing in a room full of alien dignitaries, felt like uncharted territory. His rugged jacket and Earth-standard boots were a stark contrast to the flowing robes and intricate armor of the Zarionians. He wasn't sure why he had been invited to this gathering. Zidra had been distant since the strike against the Xorith flagship. She had thanked him in her own curt, guarded way. But beyond that, she had kept her thoughts to herself. As the ornate doors at the end of the hall opened, silence fell. Zyra entered, her silver hair flowing like liquid light, her regal robes glowing faintly with the crystalline energy of Zarian. She carried herself with the confidence of a leader, but Ithan could see something different in her eyes, something softer, more uncertain. She stepped onto the dais, her gaze sweeping across the council before landing, briefly, on Ithan. Then she spoke, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Our people have endured much," she began. "We have faced threats from outside our world and divisions within. But today, we stand united, stronger than ever. Our victory against the Xorith Dominion is a testament to our resilience." The room erupted in applause, but Xira raised her hand, and the room quieted again. However, she continued, "This victory has also shown me that strength alone is not enough. For years, I believed that isolating myself was the best way to protect Zarian. I thought that by closing my heart, I could shield my people from pain and loss." Her voice faltered slightly, but she pressed on. "But I was wrong. True strength comes not from walls, but from connections, from trusting others, even when it feels like a risk." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. He could feel the weight of her words, not just for her people, but for him. Zyra turned to the council. "Today, I declare a new path for Zarian, one where alliances are forged not through fear or tradition, but through understanding and mutual respect. And as your leader, I vow to lead by example." The council members exchanged glances, unsure of what she meant, but Ethan had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be a simple political statement. Zyra stepped down from the dais and walked toward him, her violet eyes locking onto his. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Captain Ethan," she said, her voice carrying through the hall, "you have shown me a different way, a way I never considered possible. You risked your life for a world that wasn't your own. You challenged me when no one else dared. And you reminded me that sometimes the most dangerous choice is the one worth making." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Is this? "I'm asking you to stay," Zyra interrupted, her tone soft but firm. "Not just as an ally, but as something more." The council erupted into murmurs, shock rippling through the room. A Zarian princess choosing a human. It was unprecedented, scandalous, and yet no one dared openly object. Ethan scratched the back of his neck, suddenly self-conscious. "You're really putting me on the spot here, Princess." "Styra," she corrected, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "If I'm asking you to take this risk, it's only fair I do the same." He looked at her, the weight of the moment sinking in. Staying meant leaving behind everything he knew. Earth, his old life. But looking into her eyes, he realized he didn't care. His life had been about drifting from one adventure to the next, never staying long enough to form real connections. Maybe this was the new beginning he didn't know he needed. "Well," he said, grinning, "I guess I've never been one to turn down a challenge." The room was silent as Styra extended her hand. Ethan took it, and for a moment, the galaxy seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Then it settled. Xira said, turning back to the council, "Captain Ethan will remain as an ambassador and advisor to Zarian. Together, we will forge a new future." The council, though hesitant, nodded in agreement. The room slowly filled with applause, though not everyone clapped with enthusiasm. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Xira and Ethan stood on the palace balcony, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. "You sure about this?" Ethan asked, his tone lighter but still carrying an edge of seriousness. "You're risking a lot." "So are you," Tyra replied, her gaze steady. "But if I've learned anything, it's that some risks are worth taking." Ethan smirked. "Guess we'll find out, huh?" Vizira allowed herself a rare smile. "We will." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, the princess and the human stood side by side, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. For Xyra, it was no longer about fear or prophecy. It was about choice. And for Ethan, it was about finding something he never thought he'd have, a place where he truly belonged. Together, they stepped into the unknown, a princess and a human rewriting the stars.